The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
It is time to release the Atlantic Division picks. You've had the Pacific Division picks go up, the Central Division, and the Metro Division, and now we have finally released, after weeks of teasing, the Atlantic Division picks are now yours to consume. But this isn't the only thing you're going to get, because you're also going to get your picks. We're not done with the NHL picks and previews and predictions. We're going to come back, and I'm going to do an episode that's just your thoughts on the picks that I've released and where you think teams will end up. And from there, I'm going to finalize my standings choices. So I've given you what I think is going to happen. We're still weeks away from the NHL season, so I feel like there's still time for me to change my mind. And I'm going to do it based off of your feedback. So after this episode, you're going to get an episode after you get time to respond to these Atlantic Division picks, like you had time to respond to the Central and Metro and Pacific. We're going to come back and I'm going to give you an episode that's your YouTube comments, your thoughts on the picks that I gave. And we're going to finalize our official standings for this upcoming season and our prediction for how things are going to go up. And in that episode 2, I'm going to give you some of my award picks and my Stanley Cup prediction. So we're going to come back with more picks and previews leading up into the NHL season with your feedback in there. So leave a comment. I'll get into the next video if you got a good thought and you've got a good comment. It'll make it. But the bar's really high because there's a lot of smart commenters on the JBSR YouTube channel. But let's do the Atlantic Division. Enough talking, enough yapping. Buffalo Sabres, I got them in 8th place. And I got them in 8th place because I'm upset with the Buffalo Sabres. I had them as a wild card team last season. I bought into the hype of the new kids. I thought they were going to be the team that takes the step. I thought they were going to be the team that Tage gets even better, and Owen Power emerges as this great defenseman, and Dahlin is a great defenseman too, and everything kind of comes together. And none of that happened last season. Largely, it was because very early on they were down in the dumps, and goaltending wasn't good at all. So by the time January 1st rolled around, I thought they'd be off to a hot start in the year, and they completely faltered. And by January 1st, from October to January 1st, the Sabres were the 27th best team in the league. They had a record of 15, 19, and 4, largely because goaltending. Devin Levi had a 7-8-2 record, an 888 save percentage. Eric Comrie, Eric Comrie was playing for them, had an 863 save percentage and a 1-5 record. UPL had an 892 and also a 7-8-2 record. So you look at it and you say, okay, maybe if they fix the goaltending, UPL can just be the starter this year. Everything's hunky-dory. It's fine. We're back. But they also just needed to upgrade around the team. They went out and they signed Sam Lafferty, Jason Zucker, and now they get like a full season of Bo Byram. It's like, okay, cool. But you needed more than that, because if you look at the roster, they got one player that's over the age of 30, and that's Jason Zucker. I don't remember the last time a team that young in the NHL was a serious contender for a playoff spot. And you look at the other teams in the Atlantic, the other 7 teams in the Atlantic are serious people. They're serious people trying to do serious hockey things. And the Buffalo Sabres don't feel like they're being very serious. It feels like they're just treading water with all of these young kids and these draft picks that they've obtained over the course of their rebuild, and they're never taking a step forward. And where's the evidence that this is the year that they do it? Other than, okay, all of this really, really young team gets better. And that's definitely going to happen because young, talented players will get better. Owen Power is going to get better. Dahlin's going to get better. Tage is going to get better. All the young players are going to get better. But that doesn't mean it's enough to compete in a division where you already have a lot of good teams with young talent that's getting better. Plus, they actually make signings and spend cap space and do things with their team. I don't think the Buffalo Sabres have much going for them this season. I have them in 8th place. Their leading scorer, just to end it. Also forgot. I said their signings were those 3 or those 2. The third signing was James Reimer. Like, James Reimer is the problem. Is how you're going to solve your goaltending. Like, James Reimer is going to be the backup there. That's going to fix things. The guy who didn't make it in Detroit, even though there was a complete opportunity for him to like be the starter in Detroit if he really wanted to, because that was a wide open goaltending battle. Like, no. We're well past James Reimer being a starting goaltender for a playoff team here. So I don't believe a lot in Buffalo. Last year, their leading scorer had 59 points. Tuck and Dahlin tied for 59 points to lead the team in scoring. That's a team that's going to struggle to score, going to struggle to defend. They have a lot of young talent. I just wish they would support the young talent with other players and spend some cap space. So Montreal in 7th place. And Montreal being in 7th here is such a reluctant 7th because unlike Buffalo, the rebuild in Montreal is going really, really good. So you bring in Patrick Laine, and then you get a full year of Kirby Dach. That's kind of like the momentum coming into this season. It's you get to see more of Sloth, you get to see more of Gooley, you get to see more of Jacka, you get to see more of just the kids that are there. And obviously, like Caulfield and Suzuki also in their development because they're still young, even though it feels like they've been around forever now. And they're kind of they're getting to be the elder statesmen of this team. But Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton have done a masterful job rebuilding this team, and they're still in the midst of it. So I don't feel like 7th place is disrespectful. They may play above their expectations a tad and sneak into a 5th would be crazy. A 6th, I can definitely see it, a couple points back, but they're not going to be the really bad Montreal Canadiens anymore, where they're just sitting in 8th all season long and they're just hanging out there, just being fodder for the rest of the NHL. This team is going to compete. They're going to be in games consistently, and the floor for the Atlantic is going to be very high. I don't see this as a 60-point team. Like, this is going to be a really competitive 7th place team in the Atlantic Division. They just don't have enough. Like, they don't have enough weapons, especially on D. If you look at the D, Matheson, Gooley, Hudson, Savard, Jacki, and Barron, it's not a star-studded defense. It's going to struggle to stop the other team. I think over the course of this season, like, that should be the focus here because the forward group looks like, hey, give them a year to cook together, let them develop, let Patrick Laine get acclimatized to this environment, to this team, and next year they could definitely be a wild card team and a playoff team. And over the course of this season, take on contracts, build your defense, and this team could be really good in a year. It's just not this season. And the goaltending tandem of Montembeault and Primo, it's either the 7th or 8th best tandem in this division. So I'm not going to bet on Montreal Canadiens, outperforming the expectations that are set on them. Like, I don't think the expectations are very high. I don't think they're going to shoot to the moon with this D core and this goalie tandem. I think they'll just be kind of really competitive, but not great. 7th place in the Atlantic. And then we get to Detroit. And the Detroit Red Wings, I think, are the hardest team to predict in the NHL because they're kind of playoffs or bust, but is there enough there for them to be a playoff team? And I feel like the theme of this Atlantic Division preview is goaltending because we mentioned James Reimer already. James Reimer is a larger reason that the Red Wings weren't in the playoffs. Goaltending as a whole, I don't want to single out James Reimer because Alex Lyon had a 904. James Reimer had a 904. Ville Husso had an 892. So just as with Montreal, like, I don't see the depth on their back end. That's kind of why I have them below the other teams in the Atlantic and them falling back a little. And I don't know if things are going to be on the table for Steve Yzerman again. Like, is his job going to be in trouble if this team doesn't make the playoffs? Because it feels desperate here. It feels like it's been too much time for this team not to be a playoff team. But I don't think I can just definitively say they're going to be a playoff team. You have Mo Seider, great. Mo Seider on your back end. There's a number one defenseman on the majority of the teams in the league. But then you go Sherratt, Petrie, Edvinsson, Mata, Gustafsson, and they signed William Lagesson. I don't know if the depth is there for the Detroit Red Wings to turn around where you say, last year they got goal scoring. They knew how to score, and they should have been a playoff team if it weren't for a late season collapse. Is the defense going to show up this year? Is the goaltending going to show up this year? I'm not sure, and I'm not willing to confidently say that it will. I think the other teams have more sure things on the back end, and Detroit just doesn't have that right now. I see too many holes in defense, and I think like what they've done so far in the forward group is exceptional. Like they have every piece there. There's a common theme here with these teams. Like Montreal, great forward group, not enough defensive goaltending. Detroit, great forward group. I love the addition of Vladimir Tarasenko too. Not enough on defense. We'll see if the sixth overall pick there, Edvinsson can do any sixth overall pick from 2021. Sorry, can be a standout player. Like there's a really big game changer for the Red Wings if he steps up and is just more than we thought he can be. Cam Talbot is a reason that I can be wrong. Cam Talbot, if they signed him to fix the goaltending, if Cam Talbot is a lot better than I think Cam Talbot is, like the trio of Talbot, Lyon, and Husso, if they stop pucks, I'm going to be so wrong here, and Detroit could be the fourth or fifth place team here in the Atlantic. And that's only one spot above where I'm predicting them to be, the sixth place. So a jump to fourth or fifth isn't crazy. But if Cam Talbot is able to help the defense a little bit more here, then yeah, Detroit could be a fourth or fifth in this division. But I'm not willing to put my flag down in the ground and say Cam Talbot, Ville Husso, and Alex Lyon are better than Linus Ullmark. And that leads us to fifth place in the Atlantic. And that's Linus Ullmark and the Ottawa Senators. And that's the continuing theme throughout the Atlantic Division preview is goaltending. Goaltending is the main reason that Ottawa's ahead of Detroit in my rankings here, because you have one of the top 7 goaltenders of the last like half decade right now in Linus Ullmark, now in Ottawa. And I think a large reason Ottawa struggles because every time a goaltender goes there, they start struggling. And we're about to find out whether or not it's Ottawa's defense that is the reason goaltenders are bad, or it's just that goaltenders had down seasons. So they get Ullmark from the Boston Bruins. And if you look at their roster, they're truly one big defenseman away from being like, oh, wow, there's not really a lot of holes here. I like the left side of Sanderson and Shabbat. It's fantastic. It's just that right side is really lacking with Artem Zub and Jensen there on the right side. So the defense is almost done. It just needs something on that right side. And if you look at the forward group, like the forward group isn't missing much. It's just about like, is Josh Norris going to live up to his potential? Is Shane Pinto going to live up to his potential? You know, is Brady Tkachuk going to have a Brady Tkachuk season at his full strength? Claude Giroux was great last year. Can he keep it up? David Perron is such a nice addition to the team. The top 6 there in Ottawa is a really solid top 6. And then you throw in people like Ridley Grigg in the bottom 6, and you're like, oh man, like there's serious stuff here in the forward group. And with Ottawa, why have them ahead of teams like Detroit is their top 6s are comparable. I think so. The bottom 6, I kind of trust Ottawa's more. There's a lack of noise going on in Ottawa that we haven't seen much in recent years. The only noise they have is trying to get the deal with Ullmark done, which I imagine it's going to get done. Ottawa has the upper hand in the goaltending situation. Ullmark and Forsberg is a 1-2 combo that can compete with anybody. So if they live up to expectations in net, the defense plays solid team defense where the forward group can help the defense and the defense, like maybe there's a deadline buy for the Ottawa Senators, because that's the only place I see a hole is there on the right side. If they can get just a little better on that right side, maybe they play above what I think they can. This team's a good team, and they can sneak into that second wild card spot, and we could have 5 playoff teams out of the Atlantic. I could definitely see Ottawa being a playoff team this year. This is their time. It's been enough. It's been enough. And this team is looking good in Ottawa. Let's see what happens. This is their year, and then every year it's not their year. This is make or break for them. It's probably also make or break for Detroit. I think Ottawa's the make team. Detroit's kind of the break team, but who knows if it flip-flops come end of the season. That's what I'm banking on right now, though. Ottawa is the make team. And in fourth place, a question mark for me is the Toronto Maple Leafs. I got them in fourth in the division, which would be a wild card team because there's a lot of question marks with the Toronto Maple Leafs. You have a new... We're going to spend so much time on this on the Steve Dangle podcast that I don't need to go too deep on the Leafs here. But with the Leafs, you have a new head coach. You have Joseph Woll, who's never been the number one starter on any team. You have Anthony Stolarz, who we'll mention in the Florida part of this, who was a large reason the Florida Panthers are who they are, and that's Stanley Cup champions because his fantastic regular season. He was spectacular with the Florida Panthers and has had a good record throughout his entire career. But who knows how he performs now in Toronto with tandem with Woll. You have Riley and Tanev, which is probably the best number one pair that the Leafs have had in recent memory. You bring in OEL as well for depth. You got like 8 defensemen who can really play. You really struggle on the left side of your forward group, but you have Matthews, who's the best goal scorer of our generation, like Ovechkin post generation. You have the greatest goal scorer of this generation. You have Mitch Marner, who's on a contract a year, who's going to be motivating me, playing his heart out. You have Willie coming off one of the best season of his career, now in the middle of a new giant, massive deal. Tyler Bertuzzi's gone, but Max Domi is going to take on a bigger role, and Matthew Nyes is going to take another step. So with the Toronto Maple Leafs, it feels like there's a lot of question marks. And I mentioned Craig Berube, new head coach. There's a lot of question marks, but everything is very familiar. And for me, just the unknown of everything I just listed. It's the unknown of how Riley and Tanev are going to play together. Is Tanev the answer? Is that what they've been looking for on defense? Is Woll actually a great starter? Is Austin Matthews going to have another 60-goal season? Who knows? We'll see. It's gonna be a massive goal scoring season, but it's gonna be that high end. Like, where do the extra goals come from if he is only 55 goals this year? Are they going to miss Bertuzzi? You know, like there's so many questions going on here with the Leafs. Everything feels new but the same. So I can't confidently just say this team's going to be so much better than last year. I can't say that everything they've done here this offseason is an upgrade because it feels like an unknown because of how they flamed out in the playoffs, first of all. And just, you never know with a new head coach how things are going to mesh. With a new goalie tandem, how things are going to mesh. I don't think I've felt like this in a few years with the Leafs. I think last year I predicted them to win the division. Year before that, probably like second or something. This year, it's not indifference. It's just, I'm unsure. I'm unsure what they're going to come out of the gate of. And I'm here to make a prediction on what I think they're going to be. And I'm leaning towards, because I'm so unsure, it'll probably be mid-tier of this division. In the last 3 seasons, I believe, the Atlantic Division hasn't changed the top 4 teams. It's been Florida, Boston, Tampa, Toronto. Those 4 teams in different orders since the pandemic. Since the pandemic season ended, and then we had the Canadian Division season, I should say. Since the Canadian Division season, since that season, it's been those 4 teams in different orders. That's not going to change. So really here, this top 4, I can see teams sneaking up or sneaking down in between them, but out of those 4 teams that rule this division, the Toronto Maple Leafs, to me, feel like the biggest question mark on how are things going to mesh with new pieces, but the same body. They put new tires on the same car, is how I'm looking at the Leafs. We'll see. Maybe it's not even tires. Maybe it's like they changed the starter and the clutch. You know, it's a manual car and they changed the starter and the clutch. So we'll see how things play out. I'm middling with them with a 4th place pick. And in 3rd, ahead of them, is my pick of trusting Julian Breezewall. And that is the Tampa Bay Lightning, who sent out Mikhail Sergachev because Julian Breezewall felt that he's no longer worth $8.5 million. he makes per season for a long time. That's Utah's problem now. He'd rather have Ryan McDonough at 6 point something. He'd rather have that on the left side of the defense there. Andre Vasilevsky last season had I'm skipping ahead. Julian Breezewell also believes that Jake Gensel is going to be more useful to this team than Steven Stamkos, which is a bold take, but that's how he's looking at this roster. They sent out Tanner Jeannot as well, freeing up cap space to bring back McDonough and do the Gensel deal and all that fun stuff. And the thing I was about to interrupt myself and say is Andre Vasilevsky as well, on top of Julian Breezewell making those giant moves, those two big ones, the real shakers of this team, is Andre Vasilevsky. Unlike with the Leafs, where they made the changes in goal, in head coach, in not really the forward group, but in the defense, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, you have more knowns. You have more of what we can guarantee will be successful. And that's Andre Vasilevsky in goal. And last season, he had one of the worst seasons of his career. I believe his lowest save percentage, it might be of all time, in lowest save percentage of his career. I did have that in my notes. Lowest save percentage of his career, Andre Vasilevsky. Lowest amount of wins since 16-17, Andre Vasilevsky had. And he's coming back healthy this year. The most interesting stat I found about the Tampa Bay Lightning was that since March 1st to the end of the season last year, the Tampa Bay Lightning had more wins than anybody in the Atlantic Division. And that told me that once this team got healthy by that point in the year and Vasilevsky was back, everything was good. Everything was gravy. And they put up more wins than any of the other 7 teams in this division. So I look at them going into this year. You lost your captain. You lost the guy who is going to have a statue outside of the arena one day. But you're still here. Rest of the roster, you are still here with the blood of a champion. You know how this is done. Go out, prove it. And I feel like it's going to lead to success for this team during the regular season. I could easily see them sneaking into the top 2 of this division. I feel like it's been a long offseason for a team that's not used to having long off seasons. 2 years in a row losing in the first round. There's a good recipe for a strong regular season here in Tampa, and I trust Julian Breezewell. And at number 2 ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning, we have the Florida Panthers. And let's just run down some of the names that they lost this offseason from their championship winning team. They lost Brandon Montour, Tarasenko, Kyle Okposo, Anthony Stolarz, Steven Lorenz, Kevin Stunland, OEL, Nick Cousins. Like, not insignificant pieces are gone from this roster, but that doesn't mean they're going to be bad. I think the forward group, I'm less concerned. Like, I'm not really concerned about Tarasenko going out the door, Cousins going out the door, Steven Lorenz going out the door. Like, none of those players I'm too concerned about. They have a lot of depth in the forward group, and you're going to see a guy like Mackie Samoskevich, and I hope I said your name correct, Matthew or Mackie, whichever one you prefer. I hope I said your last name right. But you're going to see that right winger, what was he? The 24th overall pick in the 2021 season, who got into 7 games last year with the Panthers. You're going to see someone like Mackie step up and fill those roles. I'm not worried about the depth of the forward group, especially because when your top 6 is Verhey, Barkov, Reinhart, Rodriguez, Bennett, Tkachuk, who cares what your bottom 6 looks like? It's going to be fine. They have enough people there to do enough damage as a forward group. So I'm thumbs up from the offensive standpoint. The defense, okay. You lose Montour, that's huge. You lose OEL, that's big too. Like there's OEL's the depth piece, and then Montour's the big one. But Forsling has shown that he's truly a number 1 star defenseman, and he's going to have to do some more work as the big boy on this team. And I think he just deserves more respect in terms of, like, he's the driver of this team, and he's going to be the leader on that back end. And you bring in a guy like Nate Schmidt, who's very far removed from his days as Vegas Golden Knight. I think that was the peak of his career. He's far removed from that, but that's a good depth piece. You have Paul Maurice, who's your head coach, who's going to have this team playing great team defense. So I'm not too concerned about the back end. That's where I see them not winning this division and taking a slight step back in terms of overall points from last year. And a large part of this is also Sergei Bobrovsky. Okay, Bobrovsky last season, great season. Is he going to keep it up forever? Probably not, but he's probably going to be solid again. Spencer Knight is now the backup goalie in Florida. And last season, Steven Lorenz, Anthony Stolarz had a spectacular season, a 9.25 in 25 games. Is that repeatable from Spencer Knight? No. That's not the expectation. Shouldn't be a 9.25 out of your backup goalie out of that many games. You expect the goaltending to be slightly worse, the defense to be pretty on par or slightly worse, and the forward group to be spectacular. They're going to be good. We'll see how they hold up throughout this regular season. I expect a slight step back, but they're still so good. They still have so much depth. They're still one of the best teams in this league. So second place, I don't feel like is too far off of where they're going to finish this regular season in the Atlantic Division. And ahead of them, in first, I don't know if you're surprised, if you agree, if you disagree, let me know in the comments, the Boston Bruins. And I look at the Boston Bruins, and the common theme, the through line throughout this entire episode and previewing of the Atlantic Division is goaltending and defense. I don't think there's a forward group that I'm too down on in this out of all of these 8 teams. I like them. And I've kind of just been looking at goalie and defense and saying, who's got the best? Who's one-upping everybody? And the Boston Bruins, in my eyes, are looking at a spectacular season ahead. Jeremy Swayman is now the number 1 goalie. There's no running the best tandem ever of Allmark and Swayman out there anymore. It's just, here it is, Swayman. But we shouldn't look at that and say, man, how's he going to handle it? Because he has Jonas Korpisalo as his backup goalie. And I'm not saying Korpisalo's Allmark, but Korpisalo had a bad year in Ottawa. And I don't believe his bad year in Ottawa is entirely his fault or that he's lost what he is. Because before that, Korpisalo had spectacular years, this is split season, in LA and Columbus. Korpisalo I still think this is one of the best goalie tandems in the whole league, and especially in this division. You're still looking at 2-star goaltenders in Boston. I truly believe that when you have Korpisalo and Swayman. So I don't see the drop-off in the goaltending that I think a lot of people are expecting with them having to move off of Allmark. And they proved last season, without Patrice Bergeron, this team is still a really good team. They no longer need that giant name centerman. But they still went out and got a really good centerman in Elias Lindholm. And now he is now 1C in Boston. And without this 1C, they still finished second in the division last season. So I can only predict that they're going up from here. And lastly, let's get to the cream of the crop in terms of top pairs in this entire division. That's Zadorov, McAvoy. They signed Zadorov this offseason. They pair him with Charlie McAvoy. I don't know how anybody's getting through that in this whole division. Then you got Lindholm and Carlo on the second pairing, and then we have Lohrei and Peak. And if we're talking about underrated defensemen in this league, right near the top of the list should be Hampus Lindholm. The defense core is spectacular. I might pick it against anybody in this division. And then just to mention Zaka and Coyle, they played such big roles last season with the departure of Patrice Bergeron. It's like, okay, how do we fill this gap from this all-time Hall of Famer great who's leaving this team now? They got to step up and do this thing. And what happened was now, this offseason, after they played big roles on this team, you bring in Lindholm and you get those guys who had a year's worth of experience filling the gap. Now you take that, you say, we're going to reduce your role because we brought in a number 1 center who will play that this year. and you get your reduced role, and you can go excel not against the opponent's top players every single time you're on the ice. So I think this is a recipe for a really great regular season from the Boston Bruins, and I have them in first place in the Atlantic Division. So those are my picks. That's what I'm going with right now. We're going to come back. We're going to reevaluate based on your comments. We're going to do a whole episode on just going through the division and finalizing the picks, finalizing our Stanley Cup champion, Hart Trophy winner, and all that fun stuff. So I hope you tune in for that one as well. Thank you for tuning in to this one. You could have been anywhere in the world, but chose to be listening or watching this right now, and I appreciate you for that. That's it for me. See you again soon. Good night from Toronto.
And that is how it's done.
The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
Jesse Blake, the guy that likes to hear his name twice in one sentence. Sure, I know him. No, he doesn't have an ego at all.